Ladies and gentlemen, we have quorum. Certain board members are on their way, but we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome to the February 24th Methacton School Board meeting. Please rise for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. First item on the agenda is announcements and executive session report. First, I'd like to notify the public they're hereby advised of the audio and video recording of this meeting for the purposes of rebroadcasting. There was an executive session following the January 20th, 2015 school board meeting for matters of personnel. There was an executive session of the Human Resources Committee of the board held on February 17th, 2015 for matters of personnel. And there were executive sessions of the board held on February 18th and 20th, 2015 for matters of personnel. So just a note, the hearing for school consolidation currently stands in recess. We recessed about 10:45 p.m. yesterday. We'll start back up at 6:30 p.m. tomorrow in our Arcola Auditorium. Due to the fact that the hearing is in recess, we will therefore defer any comments on that matter to a future date before the board takes action. Anyone with comments on that matter can certainly make them at tomorrow's hearing. So we won't take any comments on the consolidation just to make sure that that all occurs within the hearing. Also wanted to note that at the end of the meeting yesterday, Dr. Zerbe had suggested taking some action, some further analysis on the process of consolidation. We're going to hold off on taking that motion up until a future board meeting after the hearing is complete and the board has received all the public comments on that matter. So there'll be no action on that this evening. By way of attendance, the following board members are currently absent: Mrs. Shackelford, Mr. Roth, Mr. Pelicano, and Mr. Phillips. All four are actually on their way, so they'll be here shortly. We'll let the record state when they get here. And I'll move on to recognition of guests and scheduled speakers. Dr. Zerbe.
Thank you, President Nascimento. This evening it gives me great pleasure. We have Methacton High School senior Kevin Bijou here with us tonight to receive a school board proclamation. Kevin obtained a perfect score on the AP Calculus AB exam. Allow me to explain this accomplishment. AP scores are reported on a 5-point scale, where 5 is equivalent to a grade of A in corresponding college courses. Kevin not only received the top score of 5, but in doing so, was one of only 5 students in the world. Let me repeat that. But in doing so, was only one of 5 students in the world to earn every point possible on the AP Calculus AB exam, answering every multiple choice question correctly and earning full points on the free response section of the exam. Not only did Kevin have a perfect score on that exam, but 2 years ago he was also recognized for a perfect score on the SAT. Please welcome, with much applause, Kevin Bijou. Kevin. I'm going to ask.
So before we embarrass Kevin anymore, it's my great pleasure to read this proclamation of the Methacton School District Board of School Directors. Whereas many Methacton School District students individually and collectively perform distinguished service to their school and or community in many ways. And whereas the reputation and image of the Methacton School District is built and enhanced by the performance of its faculty and students. And whereas the accomplishments of individual students in academic, artistic, athletic, leadership, literary, and musical endeavors bring positive community interest in school programs. And Whereas the future of any community rests in the hands of its responsible youth. And whereas Kevin Bijou has brought considerable recognition to his school and community by obtaining a perfect score of 5 on the AP Calculus AB exam, a rare and significant accomplishment. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the members of the Methacton School District Board of School Directors go on record this 24th day of February, 2015, honoring the spirit of this exemplary performance. Congratulations, Kevin. He just covered his face standing next to you. You should send out with hashtag 1 in 5 of the world.
That is such an amazing accomplishment, not only the SAT, but also in the world. Amazing. Kevin, we appreciate all the hard work that you've done to make these accomplishments. I'm certain your family is proud of you. And we, as the Methacton School District, are equally proud of you. Congratulations. The next, yes.
Before we move on, Dr. Zerbe, let's just let the record state that Mr. Pelicano is in attendance.
Next on, starting with item 5.2.2, I'd like to introduce Methacton High School Assistant Principal for Athletics and Activities, Mr. Paul Spiewak. He is here with some guests to speak about 2 recent honors bestowed upon our athletic staff and the Methacton High School football program. Mr. Spiewak?
Thank you very much to the school board and to Dr. Zerbe and to the people in the audience for having us here tonight. It's a proud night for the athletic office and for Methacton High School and the school district. The first of the 2 honors that you had mentioned, Dr. Zerbe, is the Jim Church Hospitality Award. It's similar to an award we received several years ago, and some of the key players are still in place as to why we're again receiving this recognition. This recognition is voted on by the referees and the assigners that assign the referees. Some of the reasons why they mentioned that we were selected for the award: the locker room facility being clean and changing areas for officials always clean. Our head coaches are, for the boys and the girls, both good people who lead by example. And 2 people that are here tonight that I was hoping could come down and join me as we recognize this award. If Debbie Bennett, Administrative Assistant for Athletics, could come down, and Steve Mann, who does pretty much everything in the Methacton School District. He's a retired teacher. He's currently a head coach and works as our game manager. And some of the things that they mentioned as to why we were selected again for this award: the contacting of officials every single day by Debbie Bennett to confirm times and locations. That's not something that's normally done, but she calls. We have a lot of contests every day, and she calls every single official just to confirm times and locations. She prepares the checks for them before every single event so that officials are paid in full on the day and the night of the event. And then Steve Mann, to her left, greets every single official at every single basketball game, every wrestling event, every swim meet. He greets the officials, walks them to their areas. He walks the other team to their locker rooms. It's a friendly face, water and food in the locker room for them at halftime. He also takes care of pretty much everything from scoreboards to making sure that things are working for the officials. So these 2 are really the key reason as to why we continue to get these types of recognition. So again, we are honored that you guys have thought of us and that Jim Church thought of us for the Hospitality Award, and we really appreciate the honor. Thank you very much.
I just wanted to say, like, we didn't do anything as cool as Kevin, but in my mind, you're standing and giving us a standing ovation. So, thank you.
Good stuff. We'll see you at a Hoots game. We'll see you at a Hoots game if you can get out of a meeting.
And the second award that Dr. Zerbe mentioned is something that we're extremely proud of. I think there are a lot of people in this room that know that we're very fortunate to have a football program that's led by a man that shows our student athletes every single day throughout the entire school year what it means to take care of their academics, take care of their family, take care of what goes on the football field third. And this is a recognition that I'm very proud of for our football program and for Coach Paul Lepre, because there are so many things that he does and his players do behind closed doors that they really should be recognized for. We've been honored by Access Sports to be given the Inclusion Award for this past football season, and I'm going to allow some time for others to speak about this, but again, I do want to reiterate how lucky we are as an athletic office and a school to have somebody like Paul Lepre. You'll notice when he comes up here, if you've never seen or met him before, he demands respect without even having to say a whole lot, and the players love playing for him, and they learn every single day from him, so we're very proud and excited to have him here tonight. He also brought a couple players with him, Ryan O'Toole and Jason Ekman, so if you guys could come on down. And I know we'll be calling them up here in a couple minutes, but Dr. Julie Lanzillo and Mrs. Lori McClure from Access Sports, they're the reason why they thought of us for this recognition, and we really appreciate everything. They're in the audience here today, so thank you very much to you guys and your group. Coach.
Thank you. Thanks for having us this evening. As Paul said, I'm head coach of the football team. And it's my pleasure and my honor to be up here accepting and acknowledging this award given to us by Access Sports Experiences and Mrs. Lori McClure and Dr. Julie Lanzillo. I'd also like to thank our administration, Mrs. Landis, for giving me the opportunity to be the head coach here. I played here back in the 70s, and it's my honor to now lead this team. She gives me the trust and the opportunity to run the program as myself and the staff see fit. And I think that's allowed us to have the success we've had on and off the field over the last 5 years. This award's about the kids and their families and what they make of the opportunities that are presented to them. All we ask from our players is that when you come to football, and you're at school and you're in the public, that you treat others as you would like to be treated, with dignity and respect, and we think that takes care of everything else. There's a lot of our players, parents, former parents in the audience tonight. This isn't just an award that we received this year, this is a program award. This is something that's been going on since I've had the opportunity to take over, and I'd like to recognize those people. So if you're here, please stand up and be recognized for this award tonight. Parents, players, come on guys, stand up, be recognized. This isn't something that's new to Methacton. As I said, I was a player here in the 70s, and we had a longtime coach, Coach Carl Santoro, who also basically started the life skills program here at the high school, which I am now co-teaching with a couple of other Methacton employees. And we had a young man who was a manager during my time here. We graduated the same year in 1979, but it meant so much to him that he came back for another dozen years to be part of the program. It made him feel wanted. It made him feel accepted. So, you know, what we received from Access Sports Experience isn't something new to Methacton. And over the last 5 decades, we've had the inclusion model on and off during our years as a football program. Following him was another young man. This young man loved to drink soda, and he loved to do whatever the coaches asked him to do. So Coach Santoro, on his way out to the field one day to practice, asked the young man to clean the locker room. And what the young man heard was, clean out the lockers. So as everybody was out at football practice, he proceeded to clean out the lockers. So when they came in from the field, all the lockers were cleaned out, everything was piled in the middle of the locker room. You know, but this young man did everything to the best of his ability. Took the players about an hour to find out whose sneakers were whose and whose shorts were whose and everything else. You know, but that's been part of our program, and, you know, I wouldn't trade it for the world. It started for me when I took over with the idea of, after being in the elementary school for 15 years, that there was some young man out there that would benefit from being part of our program, and we would benefit by him being part of the program. So I asked Dr. Ryan Washington, who is my supervisor here at the high school, and at the time Dr. Susan Angstadt was the elementary supervisor, and when she went to her IEP meetings and got to know the families and got to know the students that the IEP meetings were for, she helped us out, and she contacted Dr. Washington and said, I think I have the perfect young man for your program. And this young man's been part of our program, like I said, for the last 4 years now. A lot of the kids in the audience today know him real well. They've taken him under his wing when he wanted them to be his favorite player. He'd go from one guy to the next, you know, but just a great kid. Next year he's going to be a 9th grader here at the high school, and I've talked to his mom about what it is that he's going to do. Is he going to continue to be part of the program as a manager, or is he going to play? And she said, well, the doctor gave me clearance to let him play, but I'm scared to death to have him go out there and put on a uniform. But no matter in what role he plays in coming up to the high school, he'll continue to be a valued member of our program. So that's how it started for me here at the high school, and it's evolved now into the fact that we have a player in our program. We have another young man from the Life Skills program that's been our ball boy for the last couple of years. You know, and whoever shows an interest or wants an opportunity to be part of our program can be. And at the same time, to do that, you know, we expect the same expectations from them as we do from anyone else on the team, like I said, to treat each other with dignity and respect, okay, and that'll take care of everything else. So again, I want to thank Access Sports Experiences for this opportunity to be here. There's tons of other schools out there in District 1 and across the nation that do things the right way. And I'm just glad that we had this opportunity to share our experiences with you this evening. I also have 2 young men up here that have come up through the ranks with the current individual on our team. That's a player in our program, and they're going to briefly just describe what it's meant to them. So again, from myself, my coaching staff, and the Methacton football family, thanks again. Appreciate it.
Good evening, school board directors and Dr. Zerby. My name is Jason Ekman, and I am a sophomore here at Methacton. It is a great honor for me to be a part of this team for receiving this recognition. Each player on the Methacton football team has different roles and abilities, but our coaches have taught us that together we have a strong team. This valuable lesson is something that we use on and off the field and makes me proud to be a Methacton Warrior. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Ryan O'Toole. I am also a sophomore at Methacton High School. I am a member of the Methacton High School football team and the Best Buddies Club for 2 years. This club has been a great experience to connect with my peers with disabilities outside of the football team. Within the football team, we have embraced teammates and assistants with some of these kids also. I hope to continue with programs like these to help benefit kids at all levels and abilities. Thank you, Coach LaPree and board members, for allowing me to represent the Methacton High School football team with this honor and recognition of the Inclusion Award. Thank you.
And not only have they been kind enough to think of us for this award, but they've also come out tonight to the board meeting. So if I could call Lori and Dr. Lanzillo, if you guys could come up, and I think they'd like to say a few words.
Good evening. I just want to quickly say it is my absolute privilege to be able to bestow this award onto this football team. I do work for Access Sports. We provide sporting experiences for at-risk and special needs kids here in the Philadelphia area. We work with all the professional sports teams and college universities. Over the past 12 years, we've been able to provide over 150,000 sporting experiences to those who have disabilities, and it has changed their lives. I personally have the opportunity to watch a life be changed because of the Methacton football program. The player that they refer to happens to be my son. And so I have intimate knowledge and understanding of what these boys have done for him, not only here at the high school, but it started at Arcola with Coach Mayen, Coach Rosato, and then Coach LaPree. And as Coach LaPree said, it's really about the boys, and it has been. There were two boys in particular, David Sarator and Kyle Derrickson, who led the way for at least my son. And I've watched him bloom and become confident and have high self-esteem. And as I brought this team to the board of my organization and our committee, it was unanimously decided that Methacton absolutely had to be recognized for their incredible, stellar character of not only their coaching staff, but their boys as well. So thank you so much for allowing me to provide this honor to them and to all of you, and congratulations on raising some incredible young men who are going to really make a difference in this world. So thank you.
Dr. Lanzillo?
Bunch of guys.
I know it. When you're uncomfortable, that's when you're just close enough. Good job, guys.
You know, we hear a lot about sports programs, especially football programs lately, that do the wrong things and get in trouble. So it's just great to see our team really leading the way in something like this. So coach, players, we appreciate it. We're proud of you guys.
Next on the agenda, I'd like to bring to your attention a check presentation. The Warrior Pride Capital Campaign continues to enjoy amazing success, having raised more than $1.3 million so far. Tonight, I'd like to invite President Nascimento to join me in accepting a very generous donation from our solicitor, Mr. Frank Bartle, on behalf of the firm Deschel, Bartle, and Dooley.
I know.
Just want to state for the record that Mrs. Shackelforth and Mr. Phillips are in attendance.
And the last item of business, I have one other student accolade that I'd just like to bring to people's attention. Methacton High School senior Stephen McKay was recently awarded the rank of Eagle Scout by the Valley Forge Troop 73 of the Boy Scouts of America. 100 members of Troop 73 have been awarded this prestigious honor in the troop's 60-year history.
Is he here?
He's not.
We should get him here.
We will. And back to item 5.1, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Whiteleather.
Thank you. Last month, the board approved moving forward with doing a bond refunding on our 2009A and 2010 bonds. Shortly after that decision by the board was made, contacted by our financial advisors, informed us that we would have another potential opportunity to do a refunding, which is basically equating to refinancing your mortgage on your home. You get a lesser interest rate, costs less, et cetera. It's relatively straightforward in the bond world as far as that process goes. Relative to that discussion, what we were looking to do is to bring this item to our next Finance Committee meeting for discussion and consideration relative to possible recommendation to our school board on March 24th. This particular refunding could have some significant value to it, well in excess of $1 million of savings to the school district. And obviously, we will be covering this in much more detail, and a presentation by PFM, our financial advisors, will be conducted at that Finance Committee meeting to go over the specifics relative to this particular refunding, as well as the potential opportunity for consideration for further recommendation to the board on March 24th. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Zerbe, any other guest speakers or scheduled speakers?
No other scheduled speakers.
Okay. Very well. We'll move on to reports. First item, 6.1, Finance Committee. Mr. Pelicano.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Finance Committee met twice since our last board meeting, once on February 5th and once again on February 17th. In the February 5th meeting, there were several items for discussion. The committee had a discussion regarding any potential course restructuring and the financial implications associated with that. There's still some work to be done under that area, and the administration will be getting back to us on that. The committee also received an update on potential financial implications associated with some staff retirements. And no decision's been made on anything associated with that, but we just got an update with regard to the implications. There was a discussion on revenue and costs associated with the community education education programs. And I think the board expressed a desire to take a look at these programs and making sure that we at least break even with these programs going forward. And the administration is going to be doing an analysis to make sure that to see where we're at with that, if we need to tweak any of the programs in any way. Also, there was a discussion regarding special education services with Lincoln Center, and there's a change regarding that, resulting in a contract savings of about $15,000 with no service reductions with associated with that contract. One other item was review of regular reports Mr. Whiteleather distributed regarding building and departmental budget details, and we reviewed a variety of different line items in the detailed budgets, and we'll be continuing to do so in the coming months. On the 17th, just 3 items. Mr. Whiteleather provided the committee with an update on the 15-16 budget status, as well as projections for the next 2 fiscal years. There was a review and discussion of certain key cost drivers in the budget and their impact to the overall budget. In addition, there was a discussion of the various mandatory line items as far as cost goes versus the discretionary costs in the budget, and it was discussed regarding the mandatory cost being about 96% of the budget. Committee also reviewed the standard financial monthly reports that Mr. Whiteleather provides. There were some questions regarding spend in certain areas to date. There was also discussion regarding the review process that was in place regarding expenditures now that we're past the midpoint of the fiscal year. And lastly, there was a review of the Montgomery County Intermediate Unit budget, and the committee recommended that the budget be brought for approval to the full board. That concludes my report.
Thank you. Moving on to Property Committee, Mr. Phillips.
Good evening. This past month's meeting, we went over the ESCO project, which is later in our agenda. When that comes up for a vote, we can field any questions or comments. Field project, we discussed the site trailer, which we determined that wasn't necessary. We had additional space in the modular. We're working on the permits for the project. Also, change orders. That's later in our agenda, that anything lower than $10,000, the administration can handle. Anything above it, the board would have to give approval. We discussed a capital campaign to be discussed next meeting, and also reviewed requests for equipment. One of the topics that we discussed was high school campus parking and lighting. Being that the field project's going to happen this year, and that's more of a night operation. As you know, coming here tonight, the parking lot's not that well lit. The walkways aren't well lit, so we're concerned about hazards, security around the facility, and I think that needs to be addressed. And that's something that with our ESCO, that could be included in their as their evaluation. No further. Thank you.
Thank you. Item 6.3, Human Resource and Personnel Committee. Mr. Roth had an emergency and is not able to make it. I missed the last HR committee meeting, so Ms. Hackett, Ms. Woodring, anything to report on the committee? Not to put you on the spot.
Well, we did approve the committee profile there, and I think that's the final committee profile to be submitted. And of course, we reviewed the monthly personnel issues.
Okay, great. Thank you. Moving on to Education Committee, Ms. Hackett.
Attached to the Education Committee report on the agenda is the minutes of January 5th, where we first discussed the committee profile. We reviewed on an overview basis the comprehensive plan that was to be submitted in February. We discussed adding an AP French course, which we recommended to the board to be added to the curriculum in the high school. There was a report on the BYOD, Bring Your Own Device program, where it is in effect at the high school at the third marking period, and it will next be at Arcola. We had a report on the child accounting update. And one other item that we added to the agenda was teaching the alma mater to elementary school students, so they would know it by the time they got to high school. So that was a January meeting. In addition, we had a meeting on February 9th where we finalized the committee profile. We discussed AP classes and the weighting of those classes. We discussed in great detail the course selection planning guide for the high school, and they will be looking at course requirements. And we finalized our discussions on the comprehensive plan. That is all.
Thank you. Moving on to Communications and Community Relations, Mr. McFarland.
Thank you. The committee met on February 3rd. Our agenda was to review the January board update that was sent out, and Mrs. Lynch gave us an encouraging report on the number of people who opened and read the board update. We also were able to locate the board update on the Lower Providence website for additional exposure, and we have been encouraging sign-ups from citizens who are not in the main distribution for Methacton's email system, so that they too could get more of an update on the board's activities. For the February update, which will be probably within the next week, perhaps even this week, subject to some draft approval, we're going to focus primarily on some of the budget issues that Mr. Policano mentioned, to try to inform the public more about some of those key matters as we develop that budget. We also think we'll have some fields update and some recognition items to add to that. So as I said, I expect that will go out sometime in the next week or so.
Great, thank you. Policy Committee, Mrs. Woodring.
Thank you. Attached to the agenda are 3 sets of minutes taking us back to December 17th. We've reviewed a lot of policy in the last 3 meetings. We've talked about several policies impacted by some legislative action in terms of child abuse. We've talked about the hazing policy relative to some incidents that happened in regional schools, just to make sure that our policy was tight and good and provided proper guidance. We've talked a little bit about the creating of a policy on naming rights for the facility project. We had a visit by Mr. Spiewak our last meeting, and we discussed the extracurricular activities policy, the pay to participate fees specifically, and on this agenda later on, we'll get to 1 policy for a first reading, 7 for a second reading. And I want to take an opportunity to thank Dr. Reddish and John Smink and Mrs. Landis for their help in our review of the student handbooks in those respective level schools. In conjunction with policy, it's our charge to review handbooks to make sure they are current, up to date, which, by the way, gives us a bunch more policies to look at, because we need to make sure they're linked as current. And we have 1 more handbook, and that will be the Arcola level to review. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to Intermediate Unit, Mr. Phillips.
Good evening once again. A lot of stuff going on with the IU this month and next month. As of February 2nd, they started moving from their old facility over to Lafayette Avenue, their new facility. Last week, unfortunately, they had a water pipe freeze and break in the lobby, so that put a wet blanket on it, so to speak, on their opening. They've come up with new logos. Check their website out. They have a lot of new things coming around. Also, they've been working very hard on their budget to get it balanced as they could with minimal increase, and we'll see that on our Section 9.5 tonight when we vote on their budget. Thank you.
Thank you. And just thinking of the IU and their new facility made me remember that the legislative committee of the School Board Directors of Montgomery County were to have a meeting with Congressman Costello at the new facility last week. He took ill and couldn't make it, so when that gets rescheduled, I'll let everybody know in case folks are interested in hearing what the new congressman has to say. Moving on to North Monco Technical Career Center, Mr. Phillips and Ms. Woodring.
Thank you. We met at the North Montco Technical Career Center on the 18th, just this last week. We did finalize a bond for refinancing $8.8 million over at the Tech Center. That will result in a $76,000 savings for our district. We had students prevail at the Pennsylvania Farm Show in January. We took a first and a third, basically in the floral landscape area, and we had one best of show. We also approved the Interstate Maintenance Corporation as the contractor to provide custodial services at the Tech Center. And I wanted to mention the Spring Fling that has been planned for the Technical Career Center. That Spring Fling will be to benefit Anthony Flick, who you may recall was the sole survivor of the Bradley Stone attack on his family back in December. He is in North Montco Technical Career Center Junior. He's back at school doing well, and there are a whole plethora of activities that are scheduled during the Spring Fling to his benefit. So I'm wondering if maybe we can get this on our website, or I can give it to maybe Angela so we can, oh, is it? It's already on? Okay. And that's my report. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Phillips, anything to add? Great. Moving on to our student board representatives.
On the day of giving, Student Council raised $530 for the Univest account for the Stone Flick children. National Honor Society is holding fundraisers to fill baskets with baby formula, baby food, diapers, etc. for Mother's Day. Our goal is to provide for at least 40 mothers out of the 125 in the Nurse Family Partnership by the week of May 10th. Last Saturday was the Pennsylvania Junior Academy of Science competition. In the high school alone, 27 students got first place, and three of those students got perfect scores. And they will be, all 27 students will be moving on to the state level in May. FCCLA and Student Council are sponsoring Mr. Methacton. 14 seniors are participating. Tickets are $5 in advance and $7 at the door. The senior trip is planned for May 28th at the Pocono Valley Mountain Resort. Thank you.
Thanks, Akriti. Methacton's second annual Minithon will be held on March 20th. This is an 8-hour dance marathon, and they hope to raise $30,000 this year for the Four Diamonds Fund. It's a fund which helps children suffering from pediatric cancer. Also, high school students are looking forward to the musical Urinetown this year, which is presented by the high school's theater company. And Methacton High School seniors are anxiously awaiting college's responses, and we're looking forward to making decisions by May. That's all for us. Thank you.
Thank you. Urinetown, one of the classy musicals. Communications, Mrs. Lynch.
Recently, the Warrior Pride Capital Campaign launched Phase 2 of this community-wide effort, including opportunities for giving for all. To build momentum in this second phase of fundraising, campaign, several events have been planned or completed. Check presentations like the one honoring Mr. Bartle tonight and his firm have been held at the first two Methacton High School basketball playoff games, while representatives of the campaign were on hand also to distribute campaign information and answer questions about the campaign from the public. These individuals have also partnered with area intramural organizations at in-person awareness events, as well as through an email campaign to their membership. Plans are to distribute similar email to Methacton alumni as well. Our Methacton High School Warrior mascot will be raising awareness by visiting Skyview Upper Elementary School next week during lunch, while our COLA and Methacton High School students read news items about the campaign during their morning announcements this week. An online donation portal and updated website was also made live at methacton.org in order to allow for convenience in donating by credit card. And if you want to read more about the campaign, you can do so at www.methacton.com/warriorpride. And the board members have the campaign advertising postcards that were distributed and are continuing to be distributed at campaign events. And they're equipped on the back with a QR code that will drive individuals directly to the donation portal so they can make donations right from their smartphones. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we do need to recognize, Greg, the committee. They're doing a terrific job. I went to the Methacton Warriors Pee Wee football banquet and was surprised to see Lois and a bunch of folks there working the room, and I know they've been at other events too. So next time you guys meet, please pass our thanks on to them again.
Will do.
Moving on to 6.11, Superintendent Report, Dr. Zerbe.
I just want to follow up on some of the items that Angela had talked about. She did mention that we were doing some check presentations, and certainly, in fact, we recently presented several checks from donors, including the NBA, Methacton Baseball Association, Methacton United Soccer, and Jim and Kimberly Beam at the recent basketball games. The Methacton High School field renovation project is moving forward. We've held several pre-construction planning meetings internally with the county and just recently with the township. We are looking to break ground here shortly and should have a schedule out by the end of the week. That ends my report.
Thank you. Seeing as we're done reports, I'll now open the floor to public comment on board action items. If any member of the public has a comment on a board action item for this evening, please come forward. I'd ask that when you come forward, state your name, general area of residence, and please keep all comments to 3 minutes.
Joe Ferrero, 12 Pine Tree Drive. Looking at the personnel items, 10.3. Employment Administrative, approved employment of Randy Williams Sr. as Transportation Manager, salary $100K. This is a new position. Logistically, that doesn't make any sense because a year ago we had to have someone who was managing the transportation, and they would have had a price tag along with them. I'm just curious, who was the person who was doing it last year and how much were they being paid?
The person was being paid approximately $96,000.
$96,000. Now, we outsourced everybody out of here, right? For the school buses, for all the transportation. Why should we? I thought that was the point of getting rid of everybody, so that we wouldn't have to pay another person to come in here. It just seems it seems kind of like, all right, you got rid of the buses, you got rid of the people, and you got rid of the person who was there from last year. I just don't understand if this is a new position.
So we'll have discussion about the position at that point.
Yeah, it just seems really goofy and it's really misleading. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Bickelman?
Joe Bickelman from Audubon. I also have a concern about that item. I believe, what is it? What's the number? 10.3. Hiring Randy Williams as transportation manager for $100,000. The prior manager made, at the HR committee, I heard $95,000, so it might be $96,000. I just think that hiring somebody for $100,000 plus estimated benefits of around $30,000 is kind of outlandish, considering the duties that the new transportation manager does not have to contend with. They are not responsible for managing 120 drivers, 3 mechanics, and 1 secretary. They're not responsible for managing the garage and bus repairs. They're not responsible for ordering bus repair parts. They're not responsible for preparing bid specs for replacement vehicles. They no longer have the responsibility of reviewing and authorizing biweekly payroll input for drivers and mechanics. They're no longer responsible for interviewing and hiring new and substitute drivers. They're not responsible for training new drivers. This person would no longer be responsible for that. They're not responsible for maintaining driver seniority lists or assigning drivers for extracurricular activities. They're not responsible for reviewing and processing driver mileage reports or processing numerous purchase orders for supplies and repairs in the garage. They're not required to coordinate bus evacuation drills. The new person is not responsible for monitoring workman's compensation claims and dealing with all that process. And a big portion they're not responsible for is they don't have to work and administer the Teamster contract or be involved in negotiations with the Teamsters contract. So this person's going to be making $4,000 or $5,000 greater than the prior one made. And I just want to reiterate that this district has been without a transportation manager for October, November, December, January, and February. And there's no parent here complaining. I think that's due to the dedicated drivers that were hired by First Student from Methacton. I also want to let people know that before this position was advertised, this job was offered to Mary Beth Pastino, who worked as the operational assistant in the transportation department. She was offered the job at $59,900. And she said that would be a cut in pay when she considered everything. Mr. Whiteleather and Mr. Harney conducted the interview. Mrs. Pastino said that she could do the job for $70,000. Mr. Harney and Mr. Whiteleather told Mrs. Pastino that the $70,000 would be tough to get board approval for $70,000. Mrs. Pastino has 25 years experience in the transportation business. She knows the Bus Boss routing software. She knows the district like the back of her hand. I don't know if Mr. Williams knows the Bus Boss software.
Jay, can you wrap up?
Yes. The other thing is, Mr. Williams is the area general manager from First Student, who sold the district on First Student. Now he's being hired by the district for $100,000. So, I just like to be transparent. That's all.
Mr. Andrews.
John Andrews, Lower Providence. With respect to Randy Williams, my view of the issue is that you're taking a good man away from First Student, and what we have is good a man to replace him. On a separate note, an item on tonight's agenda is the school calendar for next year. And I see on the school calendar 29 days associated with Keystone exams. My wife and I recently were at a League of Women Voters meeting in Lower Merion, where there are a lot of people in that part of the county concerned with the time taken up by test exams. So at some point, not necessarily in the next 10 minutes, I think that the board and the public should be informed as to to what extent on those 29 days do the Keystone exams involve any particular student who is taking an exam. In other words, let's get some detail on this diversion from education. I think that's a reasonable request, and perhaps it's something Mrs. Katona could easily handle at the appropriate time in responding to my question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else for courtesy of the floor? Oh, Candy, go ahead.
Candy Alaba, Eagleville. I've sat in this room for a number of years. I've watched the school district outsource our cafeteria people. And the reason was to save money. I sat in this room and I watched you outsource the bus drivers to save money. Now, I have nothing personal against Mr. Williams. He seems like a very nice man. He did a very nice and very free transition. Kept most of our bus drivers. We have very, very dedicated bus drivers. And I speak as a parent who put two children through this school district, which equaled 26 years. And I love the bus drivers I had. But the fact is that you're offering a man $100,000 when you have a woman who has worked for us for 25 years. That's loyalty. And you won't even pay her $70,000? Now, I don't jump on the trending bandwagon where equal pay for women, all this. But right now, what I'm seeing is you're offering $30,000 more to a gentleman who's only been in the school district a number of months, and you won't pay $70,000 to a dedicated bus driver that we've had here for 25 years, who knows this school district inside and out. She knows the parents, she knows the employees. I personally believe you should be ashamed of yourself. This is outrageous that you would increase a salary $30,000 for someone who came with First Student and is leaving First Student to come to a school district who is no longer in the transportation business. Why is he being offered a job in this school district? And why is he making $100,000? I mean, we're in a financial crunch right now, and you're spending money like crazy, and you need to explain to the public why you feel he's worth it. I'm sure he is. But to refuse to, you say you can't afford to pay an employee $70,000 and you offer $100,000 to someone else? I think you very seriously consider this, because this looks really bad. And a lot of people would say this is discrimination, clear and simple.
Anyone else for courtesy of the floor? Okay, moving on. Board meeting minutes. I'll ask for a motion to approve the board meeting minutes of the special meeting held on January 12th, 2015, the regular meeting held on January 20th, 2015, and the special meeting held on February 3rd, 2015. Is there a motion? Brenda? Okay, so, all right, I'm going to ask for a motion to approve the board meeting minutes for January 12th and January 20th. Brenda, is there a second? Maria, discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? 8-0. And now a motion to approve the board minutes for the special meeting held on February 3rd, 2015. Greg? Kim? Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Abstention? 7-0 with one abstention, passes. Thank you. Moving on to fiscal items. Number 9, Mr. Whiteleather.
Thank you. A couple items on for your approval this evening. Item 9.1 is your monthly list of bills. 9.2 is the monthly treasurer's report. Item 9.3 is a recommendation of property committee relative to any change orders that come from the athletic improvement project as shortly commencing. Basically, the authorization would be for administration to deal with any change orders up to and including the amount of $10,000. Anything above that would require special action by school board. Item 9.4 is a recommendation from Finance Committee meeting relative to MHMR's mental health, mental retardation agreement. Can't get that out. Basically, this service agreement is to approve a provider that's going to save the school district approximately $15,000 in the current school year and $100,000 for the following school year with no reduction in service. Item 9.5 is the MCIU general operational budget for 15-16. You can see the various components of the administration costs as broken down and listed in items 1 through 5. Overall, the increase of administrative side applicable to the Methacton School District is a $177 increase, or 0.23%. And lastly, following recommendation of Property Committee, is the ESCO project investment grade audit to be performed by Schneider Electric on for your approval as well for this evening. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. Does anyone want to take any of these separately? Brenda?
9.6, like to have separate.
Okay, anything else? Okay, I'll ask for a motion to approve fiscal items 9.1 through 9.5. Mr. Pellicano, is there a second? Ms. Hackett, discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? 8-0. Item 9.6, ESCO project audit. So we're looking for a motion to approve Schneider Electric to perform an investment grade audit for the ESCO project. I know this is a property committee recommendation. Mr. Phillips, anything to say to this?
Now I make a motion.
Okay, there's a motion. Is there a second? There's a motion to approve Schneider Electric to perform the investment grade audit for ESCO. Is there a second? Is there a second? Kim, second. Sorry. Discussion.
I have a question. In that agreement, all the buildings are listed, and since we have had a recommendation to close one building, I wondered how that would affect the cost based on the number of square footage that this audit would cover.
Based on the current situation that is before the board in regards to the potential closures of one or possibly two buildings, it is in our conversation with Schneider that we will hold off on the investment grade audits last and as part of their process, and then ask them to come back to us administratively at the appropriate time to determine whether or not to proceed with those additional two buildings. And that will then, impact the overall square footage of the estimated assessment.
So would we then have a proviso in this agreement that says that?
We can certainly have that written in there prior to the official signing.
Okay.
Just to follow up to that same point, what is the timeline schedule to complete the audit once it starts?
I think the audit, it will probably take about 2 months. I would imagine that the audit would begin somewhere in the neighborhood of late March, possibly early April, and then into May.
Any further discussion? Maria?
The audit, if we decide not to go with it, I understand, I guess it was $140,000, something in that range. And if we decide to go forward with them with all the projects, that $140,000, we're not going to be charged up front. But I'm wondering, is it built in somewhere else into the cost that we're going to be paying Schneider?
Yes, that would be correct. It would be built into their price if we would decide to move forward with the project once the investment grade audit is complete. There's a step process that goes. The investment grade audit, once the board acts upon that this evening, Schneider Electric will complete their process approximately 2 months. At that point, the report brought back to Property Committee and ultimately the board will be a reflection of the work they completed for that. If the board and Property Committee choose to proceed beyond the investment grade audit, the costs associated with the investment grade audit will be rolled into the total project cost. If we would decide to back out of the project at that point, we would be charged an exit fee that would represent the hours and staff time part of the investment grade audit.
The other question I have, I guess, I keep going back and forth with this, let me tell you. One time I'm in favor of it, and the other I'm not in favor of it. The management...
Where are you tonight?
Huh?
Where are you tonight?
Tonight I'm in the middle. The management fee, I know that if we decide, okay, to do the lights, they will go out and do the RFP. They'll get the contractor. They'll have the management. But we don't know how much the fee is going to be, right? How much they're going to charge us for that management, to manage the whole thing? Isn't that what I read?
Well, the pricing specific to what would be done versus what wouldn't be done would be detailed at the completion of the investment grade audit. Right now, we have a general idea of certain parts of our facilities that could be addressed by this. What the investment grade audit will do for us, it will specifically address those components within our buildings that we can take care of through this project. Based upon that scope, size, etc., the fees and charges will be associated with that outside of the physical work that would be done. Obviously, the larger projects you have, the more costs that are associated with work outside of the physical hammers and such the physical construction. So all those costs would be detailed at the completion of the investment grade audit, at which time then we would decide what type of project we want to move forward with, the size, sequencing, all those components as well. So all these decisions were going to be post that investment grade audit.
So they're going to tell us how much it would cost, what they're going to charge us to retrofit the lights, for instance, because I'm just using that. So we will know that up front, what their management fees and everything else is going to be.
They will detail all the costs associated with the project as it's sized and scoped at the completion of the audit.
Okay.
There's a lot of factors that go into that. We, as a district, may decide to do certain parts of the project. We may not. All those decisions would be made at the conclusion of the investment grade audit, as we would determine whether or not we would want to do certain things, do the whole project as detailed, do lesser, do more, whatever the case may be.
And the savings that we get will pay for the project, basically.
Yeah, let me just step in, because there's actually quite a few members of the audience here that may not really be following where we're at with this, and this is important because I think that with the recent conversations before the board on capital improvements, this was an idea brought before the board back in January of 2014. Mr. Whiteleather and I met several times, not only with the board, but with the property committee on this over the last 15 months. What's important to understand is this was just one way for us as a district to address some of our capital needs, so boilers, lighting, and other capital building type needs. At the end of the day, the basic concept of this is that the company that we do this ESCO, Energy Savings Company, work with, will eventually use the improvements and the cost savings from the energy savings to offset the cost of the improvements over the course of the project. So essentially, what we're able to do is take some of the savings in energy to help pay for the improvements to our buildings across the district. And we felt that this was one part of a 6-part plan that we laid out in January to help address our shrinking capital fund budget. Again, there's only one part of it. It's not like we're going to be renovating an entire building or buildings with this particular project, but it will address some of our most needy aspects, and it can not only help pay for the improvements, but improve our energy efficiency as a district overall. So we think that this is just one important part of really getting some of the things that we need into place.
Thank you. So we have a motion from Jim and a second from Kim to approve Schneider Electric to perform an investment grade audit for ESCO project. If there's no further discussion, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor? Opposed? 5-3, motion passes. Okay. Mr. Whiteleather, nothing else on fiscal items?
No.
Okay, we're going to move on to personnel items. Before we do that, I'd like to ask the board to retreat to an executive session for matters of personnel for a moment. So the meeting's going to stand at recess. Bear with us for a couple minutes.
Okay.
Wait.
Okay, we're back in session. Apologize for that. We'll now move on to item 10, personnel items. Mr. Harney.
Yes, good evening. For your approval tonight, we have one resignation professional. We have two resignation classified. We have one employment administrative, Randy Williams, for transportation manager at salary as listed. We have one change of status classified this evening. We have two uncompensated leave classified this evening. 7 supplemental contracts for your approval. We're asking for your approval of the additions to the classified substitute list as listed. We also have the volunteer list for your approval this evening and 2 advisements.
Okay, I'm going to pull 10.3 out and ask for a motion to approve all items. Is there anything else you want to pull out? No? Okay. So I'll ask for a motion to approve number 10, all items except for 10.3. So 10.1, 2, and then 10.4 through 10.14. Is there a motion? Mr. Phillips, is there a second? Mr. McFarland, discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? 8-0. Item 10.3, employment administrative. I'm going to table this and turn to the solicitor for an explanation.
Yes, the matter in question was just discussed in an executive session by members of the board, it being a personnel matter. Unlike some of the statements that were made earlier, it is my understanding from having spoken with individuals involved that the position changed from the time that the first candidate was interviewed to the current understanding of the position, which includes additional duties. In an abundance of caution, the board has tabled the matter. They will specifically detail the job description. That will be done within the district. And then if there are applications received from various individuals, those individuals will be interviewed, and there will be a recommendation to the board in the future. But the difference was in the job as it went from the original position to the current position with additional duties. That was not discussed earlier from comments in the audience. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bartle. Moving on to number 11, curriculum and programs. Ms. Katona?
Yes, there's one item for your approval this evening that is for the Methacton School District's comprehensive plan. It is in compliance with the guidelines from the Pennsylvania Department of Education and has been posted publicly for 28 days as required. With your approval tonight, we can then submit this by the deadline of February 27th.
So I'll ask for a motion to approve the Methacton School District's comprehensive plan, which is in compliance with the guidelines from the Pennsylvania Department of Education and has been posted publicly for 28 days as required. Motion from Mrs. Hackett, second Mrs. Barone. Any discussion? Mrs. Woodring?
Yeah, I just want to make sure that our Education Committee has reviewed and recommended.
Yes, we have. That's why.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor? Opposed? 8-0. Moving on to policy, Dr. Zerbe.
This evening, there is one reading, first reading, policy 247, hazing, and there are 7 policies for second reading. If you turn to the first reading policy on hazing, there is one recommended change from the policy committee. It is on page 204 under complaint procedure. It now reads, when any person believes an individual student or student group has been the subject of hazing, an oral or written report should be made promptly to the building principal. There was much discussion as previously indicated by Ms. Woodring in her report on this matter. In fact, Ms. Woodring was primarily responsible for bringing this policy to the policy committee in light of some recent regional issues, and we thank her for doing that. On to 12.2, second reading. These are items for action this evening. All of these policies, number 1 through 7, were a result of some law changes and that are directly overseen by Mr. Harney. So I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Harney.
Yes, all the policy changes that were made in 302, number 1, all the way down to number 7, 317.1, all were affected by recent law changes to 3 significant areas. One was Act 168, which really increased the rigor of the background checks. The other was changes to the Educator Discipline Act, which refers to reporting and self-reporting of misconduct by professional staff, and also changes in Child Protective Services law concerning the child abuse clearances that are issued to various folks through the district. And all of those were really the 3 main changes in all of those policies.
Okay, so the hazing policy 247 is on first reading, so we'll let that lie. So right now I'll ask for a motion to approve all the policies contained in 12.2 up for second reading. Policy 302, 304, 306 and 7, 309, 317, and 317.1. Can I have a motion to approve the policies as submitted? Mrs. Barone, is there a second? Ms. Shackelford, any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? 8-0. Moving on to other, Dr. Zerbe.
13.11, we would need to approve the state science competition, approve a trip for Arcola Science Fair team to Penn State University, May 17th through the 19th. The cost of the district, $4,150. That amount was budgeted in the 2014-15 budget. On to 13.2, Future Business Leaders of American competition. Approve that trip for the Future Business Leaders of America on April 13th and 14th at a cost of $315 for transportation. 13.3, PMEA Regional Orchestra. Approve Methacton High School students participating in the Regional Orchestra March 12th through the 14th at a cost of $340. Item 13.4, gifts and donations. I ask the board to please accept the listed donations, number 1 through number 10. And I want to just publicly thank each of those donors for their kind contributions to our programs and services at the Methacton School District. And then I have item 13.5, CDL application. You need to approve the superintendent as the authorized individual assigned to CDL testing application. And 13.6, the 2015-16 district calendar. Approve the instructional calendar for the 2015-16 school year.
Thank you, Dr. Zerbe. I will hold off on 13.6, and I'll ask for a motion at this time to approve items 13.1 through 13.5. Is there a motion? Mr. Pellicano, is there a second? Mr. McFarland, any discussion?
Just a quick question on 13.1.1. Can you just give me the large pieces in that 4150? Does that include hotels and transportation?
Yes.
And then, is that basically what it is?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Anything else? I just want to, not a question, a statement. If you look at several of the gifts and donations, they're for the snack backpack program. This program was started by Principal Brucker, and she's not here tonight, is she?
She's not.
I wish she was. The principal at Eagleville Elementary, and it's just a wonderful program where the community donates and the staff and teachers develop backpacks to take food home for kids that are struggling at home and are less fortunate. And all the principals in the other elementaries and Skyview have gotten together and are expanding this program throughout the district. And so what that means is, by the generosity of these folks and the folks in the elementaries, some of these kids are going to get to eat, plain and simple. So really changing folks' lives. So I would just like to go on record and say that we're really proud of Principal Brucker and all the principals and everyone that's involved in this, and we can't thank them enough because it's really, really impactful. If there's no other comments, then I'll ask for a vote. All those in favor? Opposed? 8-0. Item 13.6, district calendar. Dr. Zerbe, can you give us some background on this, please?
I believe it was at the January meeting of the Board of School Directors that the directors directed me to come back with a calendar that would start before Labor Day. That evening in January at the board meeting, I presented a calendar that started after Labor Day. So after much discussion, I was directed and then met with, as a matter of contract, with the Methacton Education Association leadership, and had discussions relative to the ability to have a calendar for the next school year that starts before Labor Day. And before you this evening is that particular option. That is not, I just want to make it known that is not my preferred option. I had an option that would allow us to start on the 31st of August, having such 3 in-service days prior to the start of school year. That was my preferred option as I saw us moving into the next school year. The Methacton Education Association preferred having the first 3 in-service days occur in the first week of September, and then the first school day beginning on September 8th. Well, that was against the wishes of the board, and therefore the item that I'm asking you to vote on this evening places us with a 1 in-service day on the 31st, the start of school on September 1st, and then the second of 3 typical in-service days on Friday the 4th. And then the third in-service day is added to following the May testing window. Are there any questions on this calendar?
I have a question. One of the concerns was just because of the fact of when the holiday falls this year, other schools are starting sooner, and the biggest concern I think that we had was the VOTEC and making sure that our students got the same amount of instruction as the other sending districts to the VOTEC did. Does this calendar address that?
This calendar not only addresses the issue about the vocational technical school students, but it also addresses our AP students and any other course that really is looking for as much instructional time prior to the testing windows as possible. And that's really what this does. I can't say enough that at some point into the future, as we get to the point of possible negotiations, that we try to address this issue so that at some point we can see a more favorable opportunity when these cycles of days come about every 7 years or so.
Dr. Zerbe, could you just tell us, how does your recommended calendar shape up against what our peers are doing?
Well, I think at the last board meeting, I talked about the approved 2015-16 calendar by Perkiomen Valley, our neighbor. They are starting school on the 31st of August. It's the first student day. And they have the 26th, 27th, and 28th as their in-service days. I have here with me, as I said at the last meeting, North Penn. It appears that North Penn is starting on September 1st, like I'm proposing we do today. Also, Souderton School District, they are starting on the 31st. So those are the 3 districts that I compared us to at the last time, and for the purpose only, they're the other 3 districts other than Wissahickon that are part of our vocational technical program.
Dave, you're saying that the calendar that we're doing now is just taking a couple days away from the students as far as before their testing starts. Do you have a feeling how the MEA would work with us, with adjusting their contract? That way we give the kids the best amount of teaching prior to the test?
I think, Mr. Phillips, what we're proposing here, as it's before you to approve this evening, does satisfy the board's request by getting the start of school before Labor Day, and it also is in line with the language that is outlined in the MEA agreement. Any differentiation between this would either, require us to open the contract and therefore, renegotiate that particular item. And it's my understanding that the association isn't particularly interested in doing that at this moment in time.
Okay, so we'll just have this on the side for a note when we come up on the contract then, correct?
Well, it would be my administrative recommendation that the ability to set the calendar, though may needing to have some parameters around it for everyone's benefit, it should be the board's prerogative to set the calendar appropriate for the needs of all the students in the district, rather than allowing the calendar to be dictated by some contractual language.
Thank you.
And ideally, you're looking to have that third in-service day before that first week of September ends, right, in order to get the professional development in?
No, Mr. Pelicano. What I'm suggesting is the 31st be the first in-service day, which allows, after much discussion with our principals, it allows us to get a day of in-service and orientation for parents and students completed so that we have a smoother start on the 1st. We will have professional development scheduled for the 4th, but the third typical day was actually moved to the end of the testing window, so in fact that we could maximize the number of instructional days prior to all the testing.
Since we're starting on a day that's out of step with others, are we going to have busing issues with children who need to get to class before ours open?
I'm sorry.
Do we have, we transport children in the district to other schools besides Methacton. And since those schools are, I'm assuming that some of them are going to open before we do, how are we going to handle that busing? Or are we going to do it the way we always do, just normal?
Well, it's typically the way what's proposed here is that we would have our first student day on the 1st. So likely, just like in any other school year, there is usually a day or two when different schools start. But the issue would have been, maybe to your point, if we would have started after Labor Day, we may have been required to not only transport our non-pubs and parochial schools while our students were still at home waiting for school to start.
Can I?
Go ahead.
I mentioned this last time. I know that this is every 7-year cycle that Labor Day falls so late, but I am not in favor of starting before Labor Day. I think that we need to continue to allow our families to start after Labor Day. While we are starting, when Labor Day falls this late, I am in favor of it, but in the rest of the 6-year cycle that comes after, I want to know if we're going to keep it the way that we normally have it and start after Labor Day.
Well, to answer that question, I think that each year the calendar is brought before the board, and I think it's going to be to the board's decision as to whether they're going to accept the calendar or not. I came before you last month with a calendar that I thought was appropriate, and you directed me to bring one of a different form. So I'm bringing that to you tonight. If you ask me my personal opinion and my professional opinion, starting before Labor Day as far as we can, it will only help our students in the testing windows. So if we want to look at improving or creating an atmosphere to increase the opportunity for our kids to achieve on those tests, more instruction prior to the test just makes common sense. But I think that there's some reasonableness to this that we need to take into account. We need to take into account, the families and the vacations and actually jobs. I mean, students have jobs prior to during this period of time. So there's a lot of conflicting interest around this type of calendar. And I think that as a board, you need to consider all those things, but I do commend you for first thinking about our instruction and then considering those other options second.
Okay, so I'm going to ask for a motion to approve the instructional calendar for 2015-16 school year as presented. Is there a motion?
Can I ask one more question?
Sure.
Just to be clear, the reason that you preferred what was classified or called Option A was just to keep the in-service days together. That's it.
Yeah, my preferred option was to start school on the 31st of August and have 3 in-service days prior to that. That is the typical operation of the district, and that would have been the same operation if the start of school was to begin after Labor Day.
So it just fragments the in-service.
It does fragment the in-service. We're going to have to adjust, but it does provide, in my opinion, at least the most important public and student and parent portion. It allows those orientations to take place, which we feel are critical, and it does then allow us on the Friday after the start of school to pick up with the professional development.
Okay. Thank you.
All right.
So motion? Mr. Pellicano, is there a second? Mr. Phillips? I'd ask for discussion, but I'm afraid you'd keep going. Just a joke, everyone. All those in favor? Opposed? 8-0. And I would be interested in some analysis of the testing, to Mr. Andrews' point. So, Dr. Zerbe, maybe we can find what the right mechanism for that, if it's the education committee meeting or some meeting in the future. But look at the calendar, I would be interested in hearing about that. Dates for board members' calendars. Item number 14. Committee meetings, board meeting, folks can mark their calendar as such. Also would add tomorrow is, the continuation of the hearing on potential school consolidation. And I would likely ask for a special meeting at some point after tomorrow for us to discuss, to the extent possible under law, the input that we get from the community yesterday and tomorrow. So we'll work to schedule something like that in the near future. Old business? New business? Courtesy of the floor. Anyone with courtesy of the floor? Mr. Andrews?
John Andrews, Lower Providence. I applaud Mr. Nascimento for having a special meeting to discuss the community inputs at the hearing. And I well remember, I think it was November of 2006, when the board president, Van Horn, that was at his time when the Act 34 hearing occurred for Skyview. There was something on over 30 members of the public that spoke up at that hearing. Normally, that Act 34 hearing deals with specifics of the building, like perhaps what kind of lighting in the classrooms, things like that. But the hearing was about the justification for the school building. The presentation was the things like kids falling through the cracks at Arcola, various aspects of the concept. So that the hearing was, to my way of thinking, out of order with with what the requirements were. But anyhow, at the hearing, there was something like 15 people in opposition and a dozen in favor. And following that, there was zero public discussion by the school board of the contents of the hearing. It was like it never happened. We're still going forward with the thing. And, going forward with it in various ways, including fiscal. We had an unfortunate occurrence then. There was discussion last night relative to the confidence and the quality of the PEL enrollment studies. And
John, I'm going to stop you.
what I'm talking about has nothing to do with utilization.
Okay.
It's strictly the enrollment
Well, both of those are connected, though. If it's anything to do with the hearing, I want to hold it until the hearing.
I understand you.
Okay.
At Audubon this year, there was an unusual anomaly in the class makeup. In the 5 prior years, the average enrollment in kindergarten was 68. This year, the enrollment was 105. And to the best of my knowledge, it seems like where PEL did not do enrollment projections by elementary school, they might not even have been aware of that. So there were 37 extra students in this year's kindergarten class at Audubon. Never before had there been over 90 students. And in the other elementary schools, enrollment went down. So what I'm leading up to is that perhaps those students primarily come from apartments rather than single-family development homes. And if that is so, they're not likely to be students in following grades anywhere to the extent that if they were in single-family development homes. And this is an artificial skew on the quality of the PEL results. And I would think that PEL could easily adjust their results if, for instance, of those 105 students, let's say 60 of them were from apartments. I'm not talking about the quality of the education we give them. I'm talking about the expectation that the apartment dwellers may not be there a year or two from now. And they won't be replaced by such a thing because this was an unusual anomaly, and I think that it needs to be corrected in the enrollment projection work that was performed. I think I've stated the case clearly. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Diana Kurnoff. I'm co-president of the Methacton Education Association, and I guess since some of the comments were made about the calendar and the fact that the association would not open up the calendar, I felt that I needed to say some things to you. I've worked here since 1976, and this anomaly where you have Labor Day that comes later in the year happens on a cycle, and we've all lived with it when it's come. So this year, I've been here almost 39 years. This is the first time that it came up. You mentioned the tech school. I contacted my peer in the tech school, and it's a non-issue to them whether the students are there starting before Labor Day or not. That's your choice what you want to do, but it's a non-issue from the educator's point of view. The third thing I'd like to say is the contract that's in place is not something that MEA put in place. It is something that has been vetted over a long period of time, and every contract that is put in place has give and take in it. There are reasons that language about MEA's participation in the calendar and when we start are in place. And they were not necessarily things that were put into place easily. They were things that were issues that happened as we worked here. But we spent almost a year negotiating with Jeff Miller when we rewrote every single article, to include this one, in that contract. So please do not put all the responsibility in rewriting it on us. We spent 22 months negotiating a contract with Tim Quinn, and it remained in there. Or and you had a lawyer on your side at that point. I think it would be practical to remember some of the things that we have agreed to open up for you and given you. We gave you an MOU to open Skyview because that was during our 22 months of bargaining, and we could have held up opening Skyview for a year. We didn't. We gave you an MOU in that same contract to go to self-funding so you could save money with your medical insurance. We didn't have to do that then because the contract wasn't signed. We gave a MOU on planning time so that Skyview could open and we could reconfigure the elementary. We didn't have to do that at that time. We did it in good faith with the district to keep the education moving forward. We gave you an MOU last year to make up calendar days in the school year. And after we gave you the MOU and we worked it out, it didn't work the way that we thought it was going to work. But we did it in good faith. And as we think, and recently we gave you one on an issue that came up at Arcola to solve a problem. MEA does work with you. In this particular instance, we were not willing to open up the contract. Opening up a contract is a dangerous thing to do. And doing it repeatedly makes it that the contract really isn't valid. Thank you very much.
Anyone else for courtesy of the floor?
Candy Alaba, Eagleville. I had a number of questions that I wanted to ask, but you might think it pertained to the hearing last night, which it doesn't, but I'll hold on till maybe next one. But what I'd like to say is, at the special meeting of February 3rd, I was sitting in the audience and one of the residents of the school district approached the podium and discussed, Mrs. Winnie Hayes discussed the lawsuit that the school district is involved in with Worcester and the appeals and how you need to work forward, you need to compromise. I took very big exception when she stood here and berated the school board for wasting taxpayers' money. This is the same woman who was a school director who voted to put Skyview in place, who sat in this room in May of 2008 when Timmy Quinn came on board and stated she had issues with Skyview because before it was built, it had 6 empty classrooms. The following week, when they went to vote, her worries were gone. So she continued to sit here and vote to put a school in place that has the taxpayers on hook for $60 million. And she's complaining about an appeal against Worcester and how it's wasting taxpayers' money. I think she owes the taxpayers an apology for making that statement to the board. And I'm actually defending you for a change. With that being said, tonight it was brought up about Mr. Williams, and I understand you went in executive session. I am very uncomfortable about the fact what appears that you're changing the rules in the middle of the game here, and you're going to change the requirements for the position. This is the way it sounds and it looks. Right about now, it looks a little shady. I mean, it was brought up about the way 2 people were handled. It doesn't look good, and coming back in and saying the new requirements are going to be posted. I think if you brought the person in and offered them the job, you might need to handle this a little different. I mean, I know you had the lawyer explain it, but what's happening and the way it appears is 2 different things. And my first thought when I heard it is, my husband has a thing about Gibbs rules, and the one thing, Gibbs rule number 36 states, if you feel like you're being played, you are. And the appearance tonight is not very good. So I think you may need to step back and you need to explain to the public why you believe Mr. Williams should now become an employee in our administration when he was with First Student. and maybe people will think it's on the up and up, but right now, it doesn't look good.
Thank you. Do you want to?
Yeah, I did want to, I did want to comment. I too was here the night when one of the local residents came to the microphone and spoke about the case. And I think the school district's position should be understood on that, because there has been much said about, from the township standpoint, as to the position of the school district in taking an appeal, and it was sort of a "can't we all get along" type speech that was given. And we quite frankly would like nothing better than to have been in the position whereby the township had given us a by right use to use the lights on the facility. The township has now made its decision. Its decision has been appealed to the Court of Common Pleas, and so it's out of their jurisdiction and out of ours. They still do have some alternatives. They could today decide to give us a by right use of those lights. The interesting thing is all of the testimony from everybody in conjunction with that hearing said that the appropriate height maybe of those lights should be 100 feet, and you were there at the hearings. I know you were at many of them, perhaps all of them. And everybody said that at the 100-foot level, and when I say everybody, I'm talking about all the experts, at the 100-foot level, the light is more directly focused, and so there's less spillage. So that was good for the neighbors and also good for the district, because it costs less money as far as the district is concerned. We would hope that they would do that, but we can't force them to do that. The second issue was the issue with respect to the illumination level on the field. Now, there's a whole host of other issues in there, and I'm not going to bore everybody tonight and keep you here as I go through my rendition of that. You can read the brief if you'd like to at the appropriate time. But their ordinance says, with respect to illumination level, that we as the district have to suggest the appropriate illumination level on the playing field. And we're required to do that under their ordinance, and we did that under their ordinance. And then we substantiated it. You remember we hired the gentleman from Penn State, who they have the number 2 lighting department in the world, and number 1 in North America, which I thought was pretty good credentials. And he came in and said he wouldn't let his kids play on fields that were not illuminated to the 50-30 standard. That's what was said. When we made our suggestion, here's what the ordinance requires us to do. We are required in our suggestion to suggest the minimum safe levels appropriate for the type of activity on the illuminated fields. The minimum safe levels. How do you compromise that? Where do you go from there? We put our experts on, and they testified that this is the minimum safe level to use this playing field. And 2 of the 3 members of the board over there, who have no expertise in this area, came back and said, we're going to reach a compromise with what the neighbors think is appropriate. Well, I wouldn't be much of a solicitor to the district if I came in here and said, that's okay, we can accept that, and we can play on a field that has less than the minimum safe levels of lighting for this type of activity. I obviously couldn't suggest that. So they gave us no alternative but to appeal that decision, unfortunately. And remember, they're the ones who made it a conditional use in the first place. It didn't have to be made a matter of litigation. They could have said, you got 100-foot lights, and you can play to a 50-30 illumination level. And that would have been the end of it. We would have made our application as we did, and it would have been a by right use. But they got involved in a lot of things. I know there was a history here of 25 years of them opposing the lights, and then subsequently certain ones said, well, we're not going to oppose it, but they really did oppose it because they put it in a conditional use rather than a by right, and then compromised the minimum level of safe lighting. And that's the kind of thing, I don't want to quibble with people that come to the microphone. I didn't bring it up to the lady when she was here that night, but this board has no alternative but to appeal that. Thank you.
Anyone else for courtesy of the floor? Mr. Bickelman?
Joe Bickelman from Audubon. I just want to thank the board for removing item 10.3 from the agenda to reconsider that salary, because I think there's thousands of dollars to be saved there, and I appreciate that. I have one item. When I looked at the retirement for the nurse under 10.1, Robin Donis is a nurse at Worcester. She's retiring. That gives a good description of what her job was and where she's located. On the February 3rd agenda, we approved 15 early retirement incentive employees. It was just their names. I didn't know where they worked, what they did. It was just 15 names. And I was wondering if we can get a list of those 15 names and where they worked and what their jobs were, since they're retiring under the plan. And I didn't know what's the standard. Are we going to see something like 10.1, which says where they work and what they do, or are we going to see 15 names just listed?
The rationale for the way they were listed on that, at that meeting, was because it was the conclusion of the period for which the early retirement incentive was offered. We wanted to make sure that those individuals who have applied for that were listed and approved. We can certainly put the names on as detailed in an advisement in a future board meeting.
Yeah, I'd like to see.
I'd like to explain how that works, just to let you know. We're going to have them on that, all that information at the end when we honor them. So we're going to bring them all back, and also to make quite clear between what Mr. Bickelman is saying and how it was listed last week. Robin Donis is unfortunately, she's not part of the early retirement incentive. So those people were listed for purposes of outlining the people who were involved in that incentive, not necessarily recognizing where they were. So that piece was about the incentive. Robin Donis is not part of the early retirement incentive, so she wasn't on that list. She's a separate resignation that came after that. Just wanted to clarify that for you.
I would just like to see, like, those 15 people, what they did here at the school district and where they were, just like Robin Donis is listed. That way I can see when somebody comes in to replace them, I kind of know what's going on as far as where the personnel falls and who's being replaced and who's not being replaced. It's just something I'm doing on the side. The other idea I have is, people come to the school board meetings, and there's a lot more people here tonight, which is good to see. I think there should be maybe a sheet be passed around where everybody signs in that they attended. Like I would sign Joe Bickelman, Audubon, and the sheet would get passed around, and then that would become a part of the official minutes, like public in attendance. So it would show all our names in the minutes of attending the meeting, so that any time anybody can go back and say, yeah, I was at such and such meeting. So it would be part of the minutes going forward. And with the committee meetings too. I think you should be able to sign in and say, I attended, and it should be part of the minutes. It's just an idea. Yep.
Anyone else for courtesy? Go ahead.
Peter Schlenker, Lower Providence. I just want to thank the board this week, because I know it's a very hectic week for all of you, with hearings last night, board meeting tonight, hearings tomorrow night, and I just want to thank you all.
Thank you. Anyone else for courtesy of the floor? Okay. Then I will accept the motion to adjourn. Ms. Woodring with a hand rise. Mr. Pellicano gets a second. All those in favor? Unanimous. We stand adjourned. See you all tomorrow.